Jack Mitchell's weathered hands tightened around his Colt 45 as he stared at the blood-stained door handle of his own cabin. 4 days he'd been gone to Tombstone, selling horses and trying to forget the ghost that haunted his lonely homestead, 15 miles outside Tucson. Now, in the dying light of an Arizona sunset, something or someone had violated his sanctuary. The stable door hung open like a wounded mouth. Fresh blood, not yet brown with age, glistened on the iron handle. His war-trained instincts screamed danger, but something else made him pause. The blood was too neat, too deliberate, not the wild spray of violence, but the careful marking of someone who'd fought with purpose. Inside that cabin waited either his death or his salvation. In the Arizona Territory of 1882, a man learned those were often the same thing. But as Jack stepped into the shadows, his finger resting on the trigger, he couldn't know that the next 20 minutes would tear apart everything he believed about honor, desire, and the brutal arithmetic of survival. What price would he pay for what he was about to discover? And in this land where the strong preyed on the weak, was he about to become predator or prey? Stay with me, because some stories can only be born in blood and moonlight. The cabin's interior breathed with an unfamiliar presence. Jack's military-trained eyes swept the room, his Springfield rifle still mounted above the fireplace, his few valuables untouched. This wasn't a robbery. The dying embers in the stone hearth cast dancing shadows that seemed to move with life of their own. Then he saw her. She sat in the corner like a wounded mountain cat, pressed against the rough-hewn logs with a bloodied knife clutched in her small fist. But this was no ordinary frontier woman. Her skin held the bronze glow of high desert sun, and her dark hair fell in a cascade that caught the firelight like black silk. Even through the torn fabric of her dress, Jack could see the proud line of her shoulders, the defiant tilt of her chin. "Easy there," Jack said, his voice carrying the calm authority that had once commanded cavalry units. He holstered his weapon with deliberate slowness. "I'm not here to harm you." Her eyes, darker than midnight and twice as dangerous, studied him with intelligence that surprised him. When she spoke, her English carried no trace of broken accent, but flowed with the precision of education. "Your horse is injured," she said, nodding toward the stable. "Clean through, no major damage. I treated it with willow bark and sealed the wound." Jack blinked. In 30 seconds, this mysterious woman had demonstrated more medical knowledge than most frontier doctors possessed. "Who are you?" "My name is Ayanna." She lowered the knife but kept it within reach. "And before you decide whether to turn me over to the territorial authorities, you should know I killed one of the men who murdered my family." The story she told him over the next hour would have sounded impossible from anyone else's lips. Ayanna was the daughter of a White Mountain Apache chief, but she'd been educated at the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. She spoke 3 languages, could read Latin, and had returned to Arizona to help her family operate a legitimate trading post between the Apache Nation and white settlers. "Education was supposed to be my salvation," she said, accepting the coffee Jack had brewed. Her fingers wrapped around the tin cup with graceful precision. "Instead, it made me a stranger in both worlds. Too Indian for white society, too civilized for my own people." Jack studied her face in the firelight, noting the way shadows played across high cheekbones that spoke of ancient bloodlines. "What happened to your family?" "The Clanton remnants happened." Her voice carried the weight of mountains. "After the Earp brothers finished with them in Tombstone, the survivors scattered. They came to our trading post, demanding protection money. When my father refused." She paused, her dark eyes reflecting depths of pain that made Jack's chest tighten. They killed them all. All but me. She pulled aside the torn sleeve of her dress, revealing a bandaged shoulder wound. But as she moved, Jack caught a glimpse of smooth bronze skin, the elegant curve of her collarbone, the way her dress clung to the fullness of her breasts. The sight hit him like a physical blow. I managed to put an arrow through one of them before they scattered, she continued, seemingly unaware of the effect her proximity was having on him. But they'll be back. Men like that don't leave witnesses. Jack forced himself to focus on her words, rather than the way the firelight painted gold highlights on her skin. How'd you end up here? Your cabin was the first shelter I could find. I've been here 2 days, treating my wounds and your horse. I wasn't sure you'd return. She looked up at him then, and something passed between them, a recognition that went deeper than words. I always come back, Jack said quietly. This is home. Home. She tested the word like it was foreign. I'm not sure I know what that means anymore. That night, as Ayanna slept by the dying fire, Jack lay awake on his narrow cot, hyper-aware of every breath she took, every small movement she made. 3 years since Martha's death, 3 years of voluntary exile from anything resembling human warmth, and now this woman, this impossible, dangerous, beautiful woman, had appeared in his cabin like an answer to prayers he'd been afraid to voice. Dawn brought practical necessities that helped Jack ignore the growing tension between them. Ayanna's wounds needed tending, supplies required inventory, and the constant threat of pursuit demanded vigilance. But as the hours passed, their forced proximity began weaving threads of connection neither had expected. You were a soldier, she observed, watching him clean his weapons with methodical precision. Union, cavalry. Served under Custer before. He stopped, the familiar shadow crossing his face. Before what? Before I learned that wearing a uniform doesn't make a man righteous. He set down his rifle. I did things in the name of duty that still wake me up at night. Ayanna nodded, with understanding that surprised him. At Carlisle, they tried to kill the Indian to save the man. They said our ways were savage, that we needed to be civilized. She smiled without humor. Then I came home and saw what civilization had done to my people. Some lessons cost more than we can afford to pay. Their conversations grew longer, more intimate. Jack found himself sharing memories of Martha and their stillborn son, griefs he'd never spoken aloud. Ayanna told him about the isolation of being educated beyond her world, the loneliness of never quite belonging anywhere. On the 3rd day, while checking snares he'd set near the creek, Jack became aware of Ayanna moving through the brush behind him with the silence of mist. Her tracking skills rivaled any Apache warrior's, but there was something else, a predatory grace that made his pulse quicken. You're making too much noise, she whispered, appearing beside him so suddenly he started. I'm doing fine, he protested, but she was already moving past him, her body brushing against his as she pointed out sign he'd missed. See how the grass bends here? Someone passed through yesterday, heading north. Her breath was warm against his ear, and Jack caught the scent of her hair, sage and something indefinably feminine that made his blood sing. You're certain? She gave him a look that was part amusement, part challenge. I've been reading trail signs since I could walk. Trust me. Trust me. The words echoed in Jack's mind as they walked back to the cabin. When had he last trusted anyone completely? When had anyone asked him to? That evening, as Ayanna demonstrated how to prepare prickly pear cactus for eating, Jack found himself studying the elegant line of her neck, the way her hair fell forward to reveal the delicate shell of her ear. She must have felt his gaze, because she looked up suddenly, her dark eyes meeting his. The air between them crackled with unspoken desire. Jack saw the same hunger in her eyes that was building in his chest. Dangerous, forbidden, undeniable. "Jack," she said softly, and his name on her lips sounded like a prayer. He reached out, almost involuntarily, to touch her face. Her skin was silk beneath his calloused fingers, and she leaned into his palm like a cat seeking warmth. "This is madness," he whispered. "Yes," she agreed, but neither of them pulled away. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, sending sheets of rain against the cabin walls. Inside, the fire painted everything in shades of gold and amber. Ayanna had changed into one of Jack's shirts, the oversized garment hanging loose on her smaller frame, revealing tantalizing glimpses of bronze skin. They sat close together, sharing the warmth of the fire, and Jack felt the last of his resistance crumbling. When thunder shook the cabin, Ayanna moved closer, her thigh pressing against his. "I should go," she said, but made no move to leave. "Where?" Jack asked. "There's nowhere left for either of us to run." She turned to face him fully then, and he could see desire warring with uncertainty in her dark eyes. "You know what this means, what people would say. I stopped caring what people say the day I buried my family." His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "All I know is that you're here, you're real, and for the first time in 3 years, I don't feel dead inside." Their first kiss was tentative, questioning. The second was hungry, desperate, 3 years of loneliness, and a lifetime of wanting pouring out between them. Ayanna's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Jack groaned against her mouth. She was fire and silk beneath his hands, responsive and giving. He traced the column of her throat with his lips, feeling her pulse flutter like a trapped bird. When she arched against him, the soft sound she made nearly undid his control completely. His hands found the buttons of his shirt she wore, fingers trembling as he worked them free. She didn't stop him, didn't protest, as the fabric fell away to reveal the golden perfection of her body. She was beautiful beyond his wildest imaginings. Full breasts that fit his palms perfectly, a narrow waist that flared into curved hips, skin like burnished copper in the firelight. "Beautiful," he whispered against her throat, and felt her shiver in response. Her hands worked at his own shirt, desperate now, and soon they were skin to skin, the heat between them threatening to consume them both. Jack had forgotten what it felt like to want someone so completely, to need another person's touch, like air to breathe. They sank onto the rough blanket before the fire, hands exploring, mouths seeking, lost in each other. Jack traced the curve of her hip, the soft skin of her inner thigh, and Ayanna gasped his name like a benediction. But just as he moved over her, just as she opened to receive him, a sound from outside made them both freeze. Horses, multiple horses, moving fast despite the storm. "They found us," Ayanna whispered, her body going tense beneath his. Jack rolled away, reaching for his gun belt. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see torches moving in the darkness. "How many?" "4, maybe 5. Ayanna was already pulling on her clothes with efficient speed. "Jack, there's something I didn't tell you. It's not just about the murder. The territorial government wants Apache land for a railroad spur. My family's trading post was just the beginning." "Why didn't you—" "Because I was afraid you'd turn me in for the bounty." Her eyes met his across the cabin. "There's a price on my head, dead or alive." The sound of boots on the porch ended all conversation. Jack grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, while Ayanna retrieved her bow from where she'd hidden it behind the woodpile. "Mitchell!" a voice called from outside. "We know she's in there. Send her out, and we'll let you live." Jack recognized the voice. Clay Hansen, one of the Clanton gang who'd survived the Tombstone shootout, a man with a reputation for cruelty that made strong men cross the street. "Like hell," Jack muttered and called back. "You're trespassing, Hanson. Best you ride on." Harsh laughter answered him. "Can't do that, Mitchell. We got business with the Apache girl. You can either hand her over, or we'll take her after we put you in the ground. Your choice." What followed was a deadly chess game, played in lead and powder smoke. Jack had the advantage of knowing every inch of his property, but Hanson's men had numbers and the desperation of men with nothing left to lose. The first shot shattered the cabin's front window, sending glass spraying across the floor. Jack returned fire immediately, his bullet taking one of the raiders in the shoulder and spinning him off the porch. "There's a back way out," Ayanna whispered, moving beside him with her bow ready. "Through the root cellar." "No." Jack's voice was granite. "I'm done running from men like this. Done letting them take what doesn't belong to them." She looked at him with something that might have been admiration. "Then we make our stand here. Together? Together." What followed was 15 minutes of controlled violence that would have impressed Jack's old cavalry unit. Ayanna proved herself a warrior worthy of her Apache heritage, her arrows finding their mark with deadly precision. Jack's rifle work was methodical, professional, each shot calculated to maximum effect. But numbers began to tell. Jack took a bullet in the thigh that sent him stumbling, and Ayanna had to drag him behind the overturned table they were using for cover. "How bad?" she asked, already tearing strips from her dress to bind the wound. "I'll live." But Jack could feel his strength bleeding out with his blood. "Ayanna, listen to me. There's a way out of this, but you have to trust me." "What are you thinking?" "I've got friends in Tucson. Deputy Marshal Pete Donovan served with me in the war. If we can get word to him about the railroad conspiracy, about what really happened to your family." A bullet splintered the wood above their heads, cutting him off. Outside, Hanson was shouting orders to his remaining men. "They're going to rush us," Ayanna said, noting the change in their attackers' positions. "Then we better give them something to think about." Jack struggled to his feet, ignoring the fire in his leg. "Can you cover me while I get to the back room? I've got dynamite cached there from my mining days." Her eyes widened. "You'll bring the whole cabin down." "Better than letting them take you alive." He gripped her shoulders, memorizing the feel of her skin beneath his hands. "Ayanna, whatever happens, don't." She silenced him with a kiss that tasted of gunpowder and desperate love. "We're getting out of this. Both of us." The explosion, when it came, wasn't from Jack's dynamite. Clay Hanson had decided to smoke them out, and the flames that suddenly licked at the cabin's walls painted everything in hellish orange and red. "Time to go," Jack said, helping Ayanna toward the root cellar entrance. But as they moved, Hanson himself appeared in the doorway, gun drawn, his scarred face twisted with rage. "End of the line, Mitchell." The shot that rang out didn't come from Hanson's gun. Ayanna's arrow took him center mass, and he toppled backward into the flames he'd set. But the damage was done. The cabin was fully ablaze now, and they had seconds to escape. They stumbled out into the rain-soaked night, Jack leaning heavily on Ayanna's shoulder. Behind them, 3 years of lonely memories went up in smoke. But ahead... "The horses," Ayanna gasped, pointing to where Hanson's men had tethered their mounts. "We can make Tucson by dawn if we ride hard." The ride to Tucson was a nightmare of pain and determination. Jack's wound had reopened, and he was barely conscious by the time they reached the outskirts of town. But Ayanna proved herself once again, guiding them through back streets to Deputy Marshal Donovan's house, just as the sun painted the eastern mountains gold. Pete Donovan took one look at his old war buddy and the beautiful Apache woman supporting him, and asked no questions. Within an hour, Jack was lying on clean sheets, with the doctor digging the bullet from his leg, while Ayanna told her story to a room full of lawmen. "Railroad conspiracy, you said?" Marshal Donovan's weathered face was grim. "We've been hearing rumors, but couldn't get anyone to testify. Folks have a way of disappearing when they know too much." "I can give you names, dates, everything," Ayanna said. "My father kept detailed records of every attempt to force us off our land." "And you're willing to testify in territorial court?" Ayanna glanced at Jack, who managed a weak smile, despite his pain. "With the right protection, yes." 6 months later, Jack stood on the porch of their new trading post in Santa Fe, watching Ayanna tend the vegetable garden she'd planted behind their store. The territorial courts had been swift in their justice. The surviving members of the conspiracy were either dead or serving long prison sentences. The railroad had found other routes that didn't require stealing Apache land. Ayanna looked up and caught him watching, and the smile she gave him was worth every moment of pain they'd endured to reach this point. She laughed, the sound like silver bells in the desert air. "My people have a saying. Love is the only law that conquers all territories. Wise people, your ancestors, wise enough to know that some things are worth fighting for." She turned in his arms to face him. "Some things are worth everything." As night fell over New Mexico territory, Jack Mitchell held his wife close and reflected on the strange paths that had led them both to this moment. In a land where survival often meant compromising one's principles, they had chosen love over fear, truth over expedience, hope over despair. The West was changing, but some things, honor, courage, and the power of two souls finding each other across impossible odds, remained eternal as the mountains themselves. And in the distance, a coyote sang to the rising moon, its voice carrying across the vastness like a promise that even in the harshest places, love could bloom and flourish and endure. If this story of forbidden love and frontier justice moved you, I'd be honored if you'd share it with others who appreciate tales of the American West. Like this video if Jack and Ayanna's journey touched your heart, and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Subscribe for more stories where honor meets passion on the frontier. And remember, sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we choose love over fear.